You are tuned in to the FowlWeather podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
Welcome to another episode in the Young Waterfowl Professional Series. All of us in the profession of waterfowl and wetland science, conservation, and management came from somewhere. These are the stories of young, passionate conservationists that have made their passion for the ducks into a career. Today we welcome Grant Rhodes. Grant is in Dr. Kevin Ringelman's avian ecology lab at the University of California, Davis, working collaboratively with Delta Waterfowl Foundation. His research is focused on using drone-based methods to better understand waterfowl brood abundance and duckling survival in relation to the habitat out there and management actions in the Canadian Prairie Pothole Region. Grant has extensive experience flying drones, which is an awesome set of skills nowadays. He has an extensive experience flying drones to survey waterfowl and waterbirds and is passionate about using drone-based methods to improve our survey designs and ultimately our conservation efforts for ducks and I'd say wetlands too, right? So Grant, welcome to the FowlWeather podcast, Young Waterfowl Professional Series.
Awesome. Thanks for that intro, Dr. Mike. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and I see a cool background. So you're working right now in Minnedosa, Manitoba, which is an epicenter of Delta Waterfowl research. I worked there for a few weeks a long time ago. We were just chatting about that. And I think if we've got dedicated listeners, they've heard about me finding a hen canvasback hit in the road with a band on it that Dr. Frank Rower from Delta had banded. And so Minnedosa is this long-standing place. I was there, and you just asked me, summer of '97. And so we're a few years apart. But to get good Wi-Fi connection, you drove up to the Delta Marsh at Kirkhoff. Pronounce it for me.
Oh yeah, I'm at the Kirkhofer Lodge at the Delta Marsh. So the Wi-Fi at the field station is pretty non-existent. So I figured I'd come up here and I was actually picking up a nest searching apparatus that Frank Rower has built that you can mount into a truck and use it to nest search the roadsides. So figured I'd come up here and pick that up and then also do this podcast with you with some good Wi-Fi and a nice background here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The Lodge is a very historic place and lots of great Delta professionals and Delta students that have come through there. And Delta Marsh is kind of alive and well. As well, it's right on. Kind of describe maybe where that's at for our listeners.
Yeah, so it's just north of Portage La Prairie, which is just a little bit east of Winnipeg. It's at this place called the Delta Beach, but lots of great research has been done here. Over this past century, really. Aldo Leopold and Albert Hochbaum were here originally, and this is kind of hallowed grounds for duck researchers here in the Minnedosa area. So it's still alive and well, and still lots of great research and marsh ecology stuff going on over here.
Yeah, I remember driving up that road from Portage and into the, Delta field station at that time. I think most of that's kind of gone, but the lodge is still there, and there's still a lot of hunting culture. It's on the south shore of Lake Manitoba as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So love that place. Manitoba has a very fond memory in my heart, as well as North Dakota when I was working out there. So you're from Mandeville, Louisiana, which and I'm pronouncing that correct, right?
You are, yeah.
But, I'm not picking up an accent, which you probably get the business. I won't say the SHIT word, but you get the business about that all the time, probably. But so not a super rural Louisiana kid, like kind of suburbs-ish, and that's on the North Shore, Lake Pontchartrain.
Yep.
And but how'd you get into, the duck stuff? Lake Pontchartrain's covered with birds most of the winter, but where did it all come from? How'd you end up at LSU, and how'd you end up at UC Davis in California. I mean, I'm in New York. Like you're in like the most leftist place compared to New York. So like you just
Yeah.
put all the pieces together for us.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty long and winding road, so I'll try and keep it as short as possible.
That's fair.
Yeah, no, I grew up in the suburbs, like you said. Yeah, working in the tech world with people from all over the place. They definitely give me the business about my accent. I'm like, yep, I don't have one. But no, I grew up in Louisiana, just like I said, in the suburbs, playing sports, loving the outdoors, and certainly, ducks weren't on my radar then. But I love to hike and fish and camp, and going to college in my undergrad, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was actually a business major my freshman year, which I just kind of picked something. I was like, I don't really know what, and I was in community college at the time and transferring over to Louisiana State University, I wanted to pick something that I really cared about and I wanted to do and that had meaning. And so I really love the outdoors. I love like the idea of conservation. And so I actively searched for, the ecology degree. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't put a name to it, but I ended up finding it. And from there, kind of got experience taking like a dendrology class, native plant identification, ornithology, identification of birds. And once I took that class, kind of a light just went off for me, and I was like, okay, this is the major, and this is what I want to do. I want to work with birds. And it wasn't a required course for me at the time, but when I was a senior in undergrad, there was a waterfowl ecology course taught by Dr. Kevin Ringelman, and who's now my advisor. And I remember at the time, it's kind of a funny story, but we were, just talking about birds and going out on field trips. And I said, I don't know, Dr. Ringelman, I think songbirds are cooler than ducks. And that lasted about as long as, one field trip we went to the Panola Conservancy in northern Louisiana that
Yep.
Paul Dixon runs.
Yep.
Banded my first green-winged teal, and the rest is history.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, he likes to give me a little grief now, but yeah, so I ended up in the waterfowl world from then on out, and that's kind of been my goal. And yeah, I did started off my graduate degree at Louisiana State University too, but my advisor Kevin Ringelman ended up just getting a new position at University of California, Davis, and I was able to follow him there. So yeah, that's kind of the long story short of it.
Yeah, real cool stuff. And so that, some folks will stay at the university that they started at to finish their degree, and then others will follow their major professor. But Kevin was lucky enough to get that University of California, Davis position. And it's an avian ecology, but it's actually an endowed position. And so for our listeners that aren't aware of these, one of the things that folks are trying to do is ensure that kind of the waterfowl wetlands, avian ecology stuff stays at universities. I mean, avian ecology, ornithology, I think is always going to be at these wildlife programs, but something focused on waterfowl
Sure.
tends to be much less common. It was common for a while. It kind of faded with a little bit of a change in direction in academia, but there was a lot of the waterfowl world that still needed well-trained folks to go work at national wildlife refuges, work at, state wildlife management areas, work for the migratory bird office and bird banding lab and places that have been the epicenter of why waterfowl conservation in North America has been important. So as a waterfowl community, we really put our efforts together and started to focus on endowed programs that generate they're anywhere from $3 to $6 million, I think, that goes into them, and then they generate at 5% every single year in perpetuity to have someone there and fund graduate student research through those programs. So those are super important to ensure that we have those professionals in academia that are producing students like Grant that are going to go on to do great things for ducks and duck conservation. So we jump around on this. You saw all the questions ahead of time. I send every one of these folks scripts, no matter who we interview, I send them something. But what is we'll get back to your project and all that stuff. But since we got into like the next step and you being part of this endowed program and then looking to the future, what is your goal with the whole career? Or are you just following it as far as it goes and hoping it works out?
Yeah, well, I guess in a sense we all are, right? But no, yeah. So no, I mean, I plan to, while I'm still finishing up my PhD, I plan to help Kevin, kind of focus on, training the next generation of waterfowl professionals. We do the university hunt program over there.
Nice.
Um, there's waterfowl ecology coursework. So I plan on helping them with that. But, once I finish up my PhD, in an ideal world, I start working for a nonprofit like Delta Waterfowl or Ducks Unlimited, or even potentially helping, start up some new breeding projects out west in California, looking at maybe waterfowl population dynamics. So those are all kind of things that interest me, and really keep working with breeding waterfowl. I'm super interested. A lot of questions about those that system, I guess, and so that's the goal, is finish up the PhD and just keep chasing those breeding ducks.
Yeah, no, that's so important. I mean, that's the focus of so much of our research, because the survival of hens during the breeding season, the nest success, and the duckling survival in that production, that's the driver of duck populations across the range, right? That time of the year is ultra important. And so I give you a lot of respect for working on that. I work in the non-breeding season, right? That's been my niche and my interest. But I have I did it probably because I felt like there was less work on that at the time, right? But there's still a ton of work to get done to understand the drivers, especially in a changing landscape of these, in the breeding season, the survival of hens and the ultimate productivity that comes out of the breeding season. But then tell us about, so you're doing this drone-based survey, where it fits into kind of that larger, BPOP, and understanding, what numbers we have going into the fall, or at least, what the breeding population is. Like, how are drones playing into that equation, and what you're working on?
Sure. Yeah. I'll take a step back a little bit here. And Katrina Terry actually talked about it on a podcast with you a little bit earlier. But, traditionally we've used the BPOP survey, or the May survey, where it's a collaboration between, state agencies, the Canadian and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, that, estimates the breeding effort at the beginning of the year. And they use that to then, set harvest regulations for the next year, as well as, nest success that can help us determine, how breeding populations are doing. And there's also brood surveys, right? The ducklings on the landscape. And so traditionally we've used BPOP and large scale nest success surveys to kind of get an estimate of what waterfowl productivity looks like. But there is kind of like that missing piece of, once they hatch out of the nest, there's still a whole nother gauntlet of survival that they have to go to. So, you measure the breeding effort at the beginning of the season, they still have to nest. You measure the nest success, well, they still have to survive as ducklings. So brood surveys are super important and can provide like a really good measure of what the productivity is on a landscape. But duck broods are pretty secretive, and they're hard to detect, using traditional methods like walk-up surveys, where you walk up to an individual wetland, or roadside transects, where you just drive the roadsides and count the duck broods. And so what we're looking at, and what several researchers have looked at before me, is incorporating drones into brood abundance surveys, where we can estimate the total amount of broods on the landscape. And we find that those are more accurate than on-foot observers. But we still have lots of questions, regarding whether they are, giving us a true estimate of productivity or not. And so that's kind of where my research comes into play. And we're also, I work collaboratively with Hannah Sabache as well, and she's trying to incorporate some drone-based methods into pair counts as well. So overall, they can provide a more accurate estimate with less disturbance and more survey coverage than some traditional approaches.
Yeah. So are you seeing differences in that detection by a drone among species? I might think like dabbling ducks versus diving ducks and things might be different, or, broods that spend their day out in the middle of a marsh, more so like a gadwall, than the other ones that are secretive and hide in the cattails. What's going on among species?
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to that kind of anecdotally. Divers tend to hang out in the middle of the wetlands, and dabblers tend to be a little bit more secretive. They like to bed down in the vegetation, but like you said, gadwalls will also hang out in the middle. So there is definitely variation among species, and the way we do it is this drone that we use. It has a thermal camera and an optical camera. So we use the thermal camera to detect the thermal signatures of these duck broods. And those ducklings are not, very well insulated. So they light up, on a thermal camera.
Yeah.
But, with diving ducks, right, they spend their time out in the middle of the water. They're going under the water. And so there's not as much difference in the surrounding landscape and their temperatures. So they can actually be a little bit harder to detect, even though they're out in the open, right? Versus, versus like a blue-winged teal or a mallard that might be bedded in the vegetation. It's maybe depending on the time of day as well, might be a little bit cooler in the morning, and those thermal signatures stand out a little bit more. So there's all kinds of variables that we're looking at, species, the age of ducklings, right. Emergent vegetative cover, the time of day of the survey, observer experience. So these are, all kinds of stuff that we're trying to look at and just better understand what's going on with these drone-based brood surveys. So then we can feel more confident about incorporating them, into a larger landscape scale survey going forward.
I guess one of the things I was thinking about is, I remember in Northeast South Dakota when I went out and did the square mile survey stuff, after the surveys were flown to get that visual correction factor for, when the planes flew over. And I'm like, how many drone certified, drone trained people would you need to cover that? How does that work? Because I'm thinking about the geographic scope of it too, right? Like, sure. Move this person from here to here to here. I don't know the kind of economy of scale of that, of how many drones you would need, how many people you would need. And it seems like a tall task ahead of, basically just putting people out there.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's a great question. I would say that, from my experience, it might be more of an upfront cost at first, getting the drone technology, getting people certified and trained. You do have to become a certified drone pilot.
For sure.
But one thing that we've seen with previous research, Jake Bouchaw and Katrina Terry, Jake's at Delta Waterfowl and Katrina's at Ducks Unlimited. They were both grad students in the Ringelman lab, and they kind of started this drone brood survey work. And, one of the big things that they found is not only having a higher detection rate, but you can cover a lot more ground. So for people who are unfamiliar, Canada is divided into sections and quarter sections. So, essentially doing an on-foot survey, you can cover, every wetland in a quarter section. You can get about 4 quarter sections done a day. Wow. Whereas the drone can get up to 30 quarter sections done in a day. So you could get this done with less people, maybe more of an upfront cost, but less technicians. And you could almost, in a perfect world, you could kind of take it chronologically with the migration, maybe start in South Dakota and just move your way up the prairies from there. So certainly there's a lot of things that we need to tease out. But that's kind of the general idea of it. A lot of greater survey coverage.
Yeah, no, I like it. I appreciate that. It was kind of like a cornering question, and you dug your way out of that corner really well. So I appreciate that.
Sure.
So I get a lot, when we talked about the BPOP on the podcast here and such and how it works, I got a bunch of emails and, Facebook Messenger and stuff. And they're like, why don't they just fly drones? Like, I think the thought is like somehow we have military drones and you can just fly the entire Northwest Territories and places. But like, what is the real limitation to that, and why? My sense is we still have to fly planes, but I want it because you're thinking about, the drone technology and what's out there, and thinking about surveys and seeing this stuff from a drone perspective more than most of us are. So what might be the reason we're not just using drones for the full blown, breeding population survey in and of itself?
Yeah. So I would say that, it's really easy to get caught up in like, oh, drones are the best. We detect more and we cover more survey area. But and I'm tempted to kind of go down that rabbit hole as well. That's what my project is, and that's all I want to talk about. But it's not the end all be all. And that's a lot of what our research is looking into as well. So there is a limitation to survey coverage. The BPOP survey covers huge amounts of ground. It's unbelievable, and there's no way you could do that with a drone. And so those BPOP, aerial transects are still very important. I think that drones will do better than on-foot observers, and we still incorporate on-foot observers into getting a visibility correction factor for those aerial transects. And so in terms of the BPOP survey, I think that's where drones would fit in. I don't think the technology or the money for us humble conservationists is there right now, but maybe one day we'll be able to get a military grade drone and we can see what happens. But for now, I think there's a role for it, but it's not the end all be all. And I think that's something that I have to tell myself and a lot of other people as well. It's like, hey, this is great stuff, but it's not the answer to all of our problems here.
Well, and that's what I think folks don't understand, Grant, is that the process of what we've done over the years in waterfowl conservation management science, it's all steps, right? And it happens slower than what people want very often. Sure. Because people see the technology, they're like, why aren't we doing this? And it's like, just wait a second. We got to go through the process, understand how it works, understand whether it is, something that's a panacea or is actually more beneficial than what we're currently doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just the talk about like, hey, how could we improve the breeding population survey by doing the calculations differently given sex ratios?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like, you have to make sure that whatever you're going to do and implement is going to be better than what you're already doing. And that takes a lot of thought, because you can't just change the standardization and then be able to track through time. The breeding population survey in and of itself, in 1975, the standard operating procedure changed a lot. And so now we're like, really, if you want to compare the breeding population, talk about how it's changed through time, you shouldn't go past 1975. Do we really want to reset that? Or do we want you have to put a lot of thought into, is this better than what it was before? And I mean, that's the same with visual correction factor and all that stuff, right? Is like, we're fine with refining it, but we also need a standardized method to be able to track it continuously through time and use it for analysis. So I think people always kind of get all excited about new technology and ways we can improve things, but it's like, okay, let's pump the brakes a little bit. Is it better? Yep. Is it better? And that's where you're at the forefront of it. And that's what your question is can we make it better? Right.
Yep.
And that's important and to test it properly. And that takes, in your case, at least 4 to 5 years, right? Yeah. To get there. And multiple students, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm standing on the shoulders of other great researchers, right? I'm just a one in the long line and there'll be someone else after me. I think you made a great point. With this, it's tempting to just jump ahead, right? But talking about that 1975 change, is that due to actual changes in population or changes in our survey methods, right? And so we want to be able to tease that out, and by changing things drastically, it's hard to do that. So we want to take it very incrementally, and it's to kind of dive into it a little bit. This all started with Anthony Pagano and Todd Arnold. Two great duck researchers that estimated detection probabilities of duck broods. Before they just did, one site visit where they come up to the wetland, count the broods, and move on. Mm-hmm. And what they did was they incorporated a repeat site visit where they visited a wetland in the morning and the afternoon with different observers to see, hey, are we seeing all the duck broods that are out there? And what they found was that you just did one count, you missed 67% of the broods that are out there.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they did some great work, figuring that out. And after that, though, one of the assumptions that we make with that survey design of visiting them twice in a day is that at least they're detectable once, right? So that way we can know what's out there. And what Katrina Terry and Jake Bushaw found out was that drones actually count twice the amount of duck broods that on-foot observers do using that repeat site visit. So let's say, they estimated their detection probability to be, they saw 100 broods on foot and they estimated their detection probability to be 65%. So you take that number, you divide it by the detection, and you've seen 154 broods. Well, the drone counted twice as many as the on-foot observers. So actually that detection estimate is way lower than 65%. It's something more, maybe even 25%, something like that. And so if you're not seeing all the broods that are out there, you're still going to have an overinflated detection probability estimate. So again, they took it very incrementally. Pagano and Arnold started on foot, but doing repeat site visits. these new graduate students incorporated drones. But now the question is, well, are we seeing everything with the drones? And
right.
right. So
Right.
Jake Bushoff, I'll wrap it up real quick here. Jake Bushoff estimated his detection probability to be 65% with the drone. But then when you incorporate the on-foot observations, his was actually 55%. So he overestimated as well. And so, we can really dive into some of the methodology of it. I'm just kind of really taking a worldview approach to it. But what we're doing now is we're, introducing marked broods, like a known population of marked broods out there. And we have technicians doing these surveys to see if they see them or not. And since we know that,
well, and technicians that don't know that they're there.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yep.
So you have a true correction factor. So, I mean, I remember working on the prairies, and yellow-headed blackbirds. I don't know. Like, there's two things that stick out in my head: is yellow-headed because coming from just straight up red-winged blackbird country. Yep. Right? And grackles and starlings and stuff like that. But yellow-headed blackbirds are just an awesome animal. Striking against that brown kind of spring landscape of the prairie. Mm-hmm. And then ruddy ducks.
Oh my gosh.
What
beautiful.
So much love. So much love for that animal.
Yes.
But and all the shorebirds, the grassland birds, everything that makes prairies, right? It's the winnowing of the snipe in the evening. Yes. It's just awesome.
Flying over you. Yeah.
It's just awesome. But what I remember from showing up early, and that was in 1997 when I worked with Delta, and I didn't stay there long. I had like a month job. Frank, I begged my way into Delta. I was a forestry student. Folks have heard the story. I had a month. I worked 2 weeks in North Dakota and 2 weeks in Minnesota, and then they kicked me out.
Oh, wow.
No, I wasn't really like up to snuff, but I've, turned out okay. So
I think it turned out all right for you.
Turned out all right. But point is folks, if you're interested in this, just go for it if it's your passion. And then after that, I got in a job in Northeast South Dakota with Waubay Wetland Management District and worked all summer. And what was astonishing to me, and a girlfriend at that time had bought a new camera and gave me her camera. And so I was on the prairies with this brand new camera. And I was all jazzed to take all these pictures. And all of a sudden, all the ducks were gone.
Yeah.
They just disappear. Right. And because they don't want to be seen once the hatch there's all this flurry of stuff early in the spring. And then once those ducklings come out, I mean, they don't want to be seen, and they're pretty hidden because they got to survive. That's the game at that point. And so it got hard to get pictures in general. I got a lot of blurry pictures of ducks.
Come fly a drone. You'll find them.
Yeah. Well, that's my comment is that, is your sense there's a lot more there than, that's where we're at. There's a lot more there than what we're seeing, right?
Yes.
And so do you think traditional, this is digging a little bit in the weeds, but do you think traditional visual correction factors are way low?
It's hard to say. I won't act like I know the answer to that question.
That's fair. And I didn't, it's kind of like a drilling question. And I just want to see, where this all kind of plays out. I'm not going to hold you to it. So
sure. I'm definitely leaning in that direction though. I've learned so much. This is my fourth summer on the prairies. And I've used different drone technology, and the older models that we use, I was like, oh, we're seeing everything that's out there. And that's just not the case. So I just think, again, it's not that previous things are wrong or anything like that, but we're making strides in the right direction, right? We got to take these things incrementally. So I think we're going to learn a lot with this drone technology. And we actually recently published a paper where I had these marked broods out there, and I knew where they were. And we used a radio telemetry. They have radio transmitters on them, and we had a drone-based radio telemetry system where we could use to locate these broods. So I knew which wetland these broods were on. I was also tracking their duckling survival, and I still couldn't always see them, even though I knew what wetland they're on. I would circle that. It's not a huge wetland. It's the Prairie Pothole Region, right? And so there's large wetlands, but they tend to hang out in these smaller seasonals in the beginning. And they're hard to see. Even if you know where they are, I'd circle that wetland.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's me knowing and making a concerted effort. If you're just a technician or if you've got a lot of ground to cover, you're going to spend a little bit of time at that wetland and you're going to move on. So these
Right.
visibility correction factors, right? It's really interesting stuff to dig into, and I could talk about it all day.
Yeah, no, you're good. And I remember even walking up to some of them, and if they're, emergents that have been there for a while and they've got a cattail rim,
Hmm.
they're hard to see into. I
Yeah.
mean, I remember going into them to take pictures of ruddy ducks and I walked in, got in the cattail, just a young kid, and I'm like, the only way I'm going to get these pictures is if I just swamp my waders right now
Yep.
and hang out like shoulder deep in this cold ass water
You
and
gotta
take
want it.
pictures of these. You gotta want it, yeah. And I did it, and I think I've lost those pictures, but I think I still use like one or two of them for my waterfowl ecology and management class for waterfowl ID stuff. Because they're grainy enough to be confusing, but there's enough characteristics there that it makes it, the
Sure.
student should be able to get them. But the point is like there's a lot of it when you're even when you're walking and you at top of the hill, some of these basins you go down and you can kind of see it, but when you get close to it, where you should really be able to see waterfowl, all of a sudden you're obscured by the
Yep.
vegetation that's there as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's challenging. It's definitely challenging. Hey, let's switch gears a little bit because you talked about the Delta Waterfowl University Hunt Program a little bit there, and we've been doing that at ESF. Did you partake in that at LSU when you were there with Dr. Ringelman? And I'm guessing that's transferred to the UC Davis, University of California Davis program as well.
Yep.
And we didn't talk much about your background with hunting and such, but you want to dig into that a little bit, talk about the University Hunt program. And I don't know if you took part in that or helped out or where you're at with
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah. I'd be happy to. Well, I just want to say too, it still continues on at Louisiana State today as well. When I was an undergrad, that was the COVID years, right?
Mm,
So did not get to participate in it myself. And funny enough, I didn't grow up hunting. Just to kind of back up, I didn't grow up hunting. I've been hunting since, and as a graduate student, I was actually supposed to be a mentor on one of the LSU hunts, and it was an early season teal hunt, and there was no water on the landscape.
just like a
So,
drought year. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm a huge proponent of the university hunt program. Haven't been able to partake in it due to some certain extenuating circumstances. But I have been hunting before, and you had a recent guest on the podcast, Corey Highway, who I told you beforehand I have a lot of respect for. I worked for him as a technician right before I went to grad school. So I'd been in the waterfowl world as a technician doing the research and talking with people, but I was kind of missing, that other half of what this is, right? And I really wanted to get involved in hunting and try that out. And Corey was, nice enough and gracious enough to take me out hunting my first time. And we were kind of talking about it. I got to sit for opening day on public land with Corey Highway and Keith Hagee, who's now with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Habitat and Population Evaluation Team up in Bismarck, and a couple of other of our technicians. And we had a great first hunt with green wings and spoonies coming in, and it was awesome. And so I spent my last technician job before grad school banding mallards and hunting mallards, and it was lots of fun. We got to get on private land and have the best of the best hunts, and then me and the technicians would go out on some public land and get skunked. And so you got kind of you got the whole range of it in one
we
like
feel
3 to 4 month span.
we feel your pain. We've all been
Yeah,
there. So
it was great
yeah,
though.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it was all about the experiences, and I was
Did Hagee
actually
teach you about duck kebabs and all that stuff? Do you get to you get
no,
to
I didn't get the pleasure of that.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, we got to get the duck recipes in you at some point.
Sure.
So, you've talked about a bunch of, mentors and such here. Do you feel like you had, maybe dig back deep into your youth and such, and maybe you told us about some inspiration, right? But as somebody from kind of suburbia, and I don't put that as like a negative thing, but like,
Hmm.
what is if you could reach back, was it like chasing frogs? Like what was it? Like I grew up in a cabin in the middle of the woods, but my mom always had picture books and stuff of wildlife and things, and I fondly remember that stuff. I have a hard time piecing together everything that created me as a wildlife biologist, as a waterfowl person, right? But do you have like digging deeper back than you did before? Like what were those things that really sparked that interest?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've thought about this a lot, and I don't know if I would say I have like a specific experience, right, of someone mentoring me or fostering me in that way. But I will say this, my parents, they have been so supportive of me from the beginning and willing to, kindle any interest I've ever had. Whatever sports I wanted to play, if I wanted to, get into some random hobby, they were there to support me through all of it, right? And so, my dad would take us, fishing and hiking and out camping and stuff like that. And so I just kind of had just this baseline love of the outdoors. And, this isn't a typical career field that you want to get into, right? And so when I found that, they were just super supportive of it, right? Most people were like, go be a lawyer, go be a, salesperson or something like that. But they were willing to kind of like take that risk on me. So yeah, I can't say I did chase bullfrogs. I did pick up snakes and stuff like that. But I think that there wasn't a specific person. There were lots of supporting people and lots of experiences that I grew up with that kind of just led me there. But I'd say bringing it more to the present. Dr. Kevin Ringelman, he's been so instrumental in my career so far. From first fostering my passion for waterfowl. He gave me my first waterfowl technician job, and has continued to work with me and be there and support me in anything I've done. And also Dr. Chris Nicolai at Delta Waterfowl. I got my, I had done some waterfowl jobs. I had done, drone jobs. And he hired me to work in Manitoba in 2022 to kind of help revamp the brood surveys and get the drone work going again. And I mean, I would call him every day, essentially, with science questions. We talked about mark recapture, survey design, Prottle's robust design surveys. So all kinds.
And he picks up the phone.
Yes.
Right? Like I cold call Chris all the time, right? Yeah. I try not to bug him more than like once a week.
Yeah.
But the dude has time for everybody. If folks aren't familiar, Dr. Chris Nicolai is the scientist for Delta Waterfowl. And so has his finger on all these different types of projects and works with each one of these students on their projects and discusses it with them. So I just wanted to like plug that, Grant, too, is, how much of an asset Chris is in general to the waterfowl community and the students that work with Delta.
He is, and not just me, like anybody. That guy loves talking ducks and he loves talking science. And that opened up my eyes. Like, everyone wants to, hold a duck or something, right? But he really got me interested in the science behind everything. So yeah, I can't sing his praises enough.
So Grant, let's jump to, you're working in a PhD role now. You've got a fair bit of time behind you. We have high school kids that actually listen to this podcast, as well as university folks and so on. What is, life advice for how to succeed if in this field of waterfowl and wetlands, if you wanted to move forward, into your position? As I've always said, I feel like sometimes I've forgotten the things that have been helpful for me to where I've gotten. So sometimes the kids on the ground these days are better off giving the advice than I even am. So what is if you had a couple pieces of advice to give to folks to get into this field, what would it be?
Yeah. I've got a couple of different things that come to mind. I'm kind of at a different stage than I was as maybe an undergrad or as a technician. And I've got my own set of problems now as a graduate student, right? But, there's advice that I've kind of gathered from other people and learned myself, I guess, the hard way through all of that. And, I really struggled as an undergrad getting that first wildlife job. That's a really tough one to get. And, this might come off as kind of cliche, but just don't give up. I mean, I really wanted to. It was super frustrating. I applied to all kinds of jobs and wasn't getting accepted to any of them. And, don't let that discourage you. You can do this. And if you want it, you'll get that job. And so that's what I would say to some younger folks. Get out there, apply to everything. Don't let geography limit you or even the species or system, really. My first job I worked was as a vegetation management intern in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Now, I did a lot of like invasive species work, and I bugged the wildlife people to take me out every day. But just get your foot in the door, you know? And then I would say probably as a graduate student now, or even as a technician, you know, you have this idea of how things are going to go when you get out there, right? And they never go according to plan. I worked my past 2 years in Saskatchewan, and you know, poor nest success has actually driven me back to Manitoba. And you know, it's you work really hard, and you put in the effort, and you don't always get the results. And it's just something that's kind of out of your control sometimes. And you know, you just have to learn to accept those things, and it's ecology, and it's not always going to go the way you think it's going to go. But that's okay.
It's not okay, right? It's not physics and it's not engineering. It doesn't.
We're not in the lab.
It doesn't agree with the laws of things, right? And so you have to be ready for that change. I tell my students that all the time. I mean, our proposal process at ESF is like, okay, this looks good, right? We're not. Yeah. I mean, it's got to be in a working form. And students are always like, well, wait a second. What about this? What about? I'm like, nah, it's going to change. Yeah. The biggest thing you have to be is adaptable to it, because a lot of it when you're working out in natural systems, you know, you're not in the lab, you know, you're doing observational research, is that it's going to change around you and you're going to have to adapt to it. As you said, you started in Saskatchewan, but it was so dry. There was basically just no production last year is what you ran into. And so you moved over to
densities were high. Yep.
And you moved over to Manitoba and you're doing well. Better, maybe, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the season is young and full of hope, and we'll see what happens. But I guess my main, like, you know, advice for, you know, undergrads, graduate students is, you know, don't let those things discourage you. I mean, that's just, I think what I've learned is everyone goes through that process in some form or fashion. You'll get the job, I hope, you'll get the graduate degree. And, you know, again, another little cliche thing is, you know, just, you know, you can do it, and, you know, just believe in yourself and it'll all work out as long as you put the work in, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's the biggest thing is you obviously can't be a slacker. This is as much a passion and effort as it is a passion in your work in and of itself, right? It is. You got to get up each day and do it. And so Guy Baldessari, who I took waterfowl ecology and management from at ESF. That's awesome. And he unfortunately passed away too early. Mm-hmm. And I somehow just ended up in that position. It wasn't like nothing was like, I'm just going to take Guy's job someday. It was just like a lot of moving around and just somehow ended up back here. My wife got a job with DU in New York, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have to get all into it. But Guy's advice always was this: simply control what you can control.
Yep.
And whenever you're in like a really stressful situation, you got to think, did I create this stress for myself because I didn't control what I can control? Or is this stress exist because there's things out there I can't control?
Yep.
And you got to work somewhere in between there, because at some point you can't be lazy, because there are things you can control that you probably should, right?
Yeah.
So there's a little nuance to that. But you got to be careful about being overly stressed out about stuff that you can't control, right? Get up each day, do good work, you know, and by get up each day, I don't mean it like noon. Like, get up each day.
Go in that wetland, even if you have holes in your waders, you know? Right. You got to do it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and birds get up early, by the way. The world wakes up early, so you should probably be an early bird if you're a waterfowl nerd like you and I are. But, you know, be good to your neighbor, do good work, and get up and do it. Advice. Do it day after day. Yeah. For years, and it doesn't happen overnight, right? Like, you know this, like your MO, your mode of operation is to just get up every day and plug away at it.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'd never thought I would be here, right? I mean, I remember wanting a technician job so bad. I remember wanting a graduate program so bad. And then you get your own new set of problems, and it's like, well, take a step and look back, and, you know, you put in the work, and then look where you are now, right? And so, like you said, it doesn't happen every day, but, you know, that kind of goes back to that advice again. Just control what you can control, and the rest will figure itself out.
Bingo. Yeah. Hey, so what's the prairies looking like, Grant? I mean, you talked about the Manitoba's looking a little bit better, but in your part of the world, so you're covering how big of a portion of Manitoba are you working in right now, you think?
We're working in between the Minnedosa area, which is a very famous waterfowl area, and Shoal Lake, which is maybe 60 miles to the west of us. We've got about six study blocks. They're about 65 square kilometers each, so
Hmm.
pretty big area.
Yep.
And that's kind of in the parkland region. And like I said, I worked in Saskatchewan the previous 2 summers. That's a little bit more mixed prairie. Same kind of study setup, but I would say it's probably average conditions, maybe a little below average, a
Hmm.
little bit drier than it has been. Whereas, Saskatchewan, at least in my area where I worked, which was in between Saskatoon and Humboldt for people who are familiar,
Yep.
probably the wettest it's been in the past 5 years.
Oh,
So
really?
lots of variability just between those two study sites, right? But Manitoba is a pretty wetland. There's a high density of wetlands here, so even with average to a little below average conditions, I feel good about what the productivity is going to look like this summer.
Yeah, so temperatures have been reasonable for you. We talked about it beforehand. I still got the sweatshirt on here.
I've got the
It's
short sleeves.
46 degrees and rain. Like we just been getting crushed over here in the Northeast. I think it's the wettest May in 130 years, supposedly.
Wow.
So, no, it's been bad. Like, my food plots are tilled when I can get to it, but I haven't had even a chance to plant, soybeans and sorghum. And we do a ton of
Yep.
mix of stuff. We do a little bit of corn and things like that. It's deer food plot stuff. My garden, like, I started all my stuff. Like, my okra got eaten by slugs. I got tomato plants getting eaten by rabbits are snipping them off. I'm like, tomato plants are not like there's dandelions and like nice green stuff. Like, why are you trying to eat
Yeah.
tomato plants? We had a fox chasing our chickens today in the yard. Like, everything's struggling over here, but it seems like
Yeah.
it's pretty like as long as if you get wet on the prairies during the spring and it's really cold and ducklings are hatching, they'll die, right? Like hypothermia stuff.
Yeah.
But it's been a
Exposure,
pretty
sure.
warm. Like the rains that have been coming have been reasonably warm. It sounds like so, and fill in
Yeah.
some shallow basins is my interpretation of that pretty close.
Yeah, so a lot more recently, what I've noticed is, we typically have relied kind of on that snowpack in the winter for our precipitation, and more. Again, this is just me over the past 4 years. Someone else much smarter could speak to this, but I find that we're relying more and more on spring precipitation events to kind of fill these wetlands, and so. I know last year in Manitoba we got like snow this time last year, so lots of
Yeah.
water, and that can be good for later in the season. That can be kind of tough on some earlier nesters.
Mm-hmm.
Right now it's a little bit drier. We've gotten some spring precipitation, but not a whole lot. I think we might be expecting some coming up here. I was listening to the radio the other day. It's been dry enough to where the farmers have seeded over half their crops already. So
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, I think the farmers are happy with it, but it kind of remains to be seen whether the water conditions are going to hold or not. But I'm optimistic though.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to jump back to, a bumper crop of ducks tomorrow, right? There's still a lot of water on the landscape. You've seen this, like just the drain tile and stuff has created a ton of, semi-permanence, permanence, but it's the
Yes.
really shallow productive stuff that when we get either a lot of snowpack and a good, frost seal and then some rain, that stuff can jump really quick. We haven't
Hmm.
seen that in the past few. So when people talk about drought, right, because we haven't seen, that type of water in, I don't know, like the past 10 years or something. So people are talking about drought, but what's really happening is it's the really productive
Consolidation.
shallow wetland type stuff, right?
Yeah.
The aggregation of that water into like there's still a lot of wetlands out there. They're just way less productive, right? Those lake systems and stuff just aren't producing ducks for the most part. So,
Yeah, yeah, those temporary and seasonal wetlands are really important in the beginning of the year. That those are the first ones to open up for the ducks coming into the area and giving them food. And those seasonal wetlands provide lots of cover for ducklings and overwater nesting ducks as well. And the semi permanents are important too. But yeah, those shallow seasonal and temporary wetlands are super important on the landscape. So yeah, we have there's lots of water, but it's a lot of it's consolidated into those semi-permanent and permanent wetlands.
Yeah, well, let's hope. I mean, I had hope with the La Nina year for some more snow on the prairies. It really didn't materialize like we would have liked, but this last little shot of rain, especially the U.S. prairies, like kind of the Coteau region of North Dakota and South Dakota, got a ton of rain. So I
Oh,
don't
okay.
did, and I don't know, Manitoba get hit with some of that stuff at the same time. It
We
sounds like
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, we got a little bit of that. Yeah. And that was very much appreciated. It's kind of funny. We have another graduate student up here, Rich Kane, who's studying overwater nesting canvasbacks, and he wants some good rain and cold conditions, so his thermal camera works to
Uh,
find overwater duck nests. And I kind of like the warm weather, so I can get out on the quad and search for my upland duck nest. So kind of have a little difference of opinions here.
well, maybe you get one year that's good for him and one year that's good for you, and
Yeah, but I mean, the
we all
rain in
get
general,
there.
though, the rain is appreciated, and it's definitely much needed over the prairies.
Yeah. So when you're out there, Grant, it's not just the ducks you're seeing. What do you have another like critter in general that you're a huge fan of that exists that relies on either the wetlands or the prairie grass?
Oh yeah, I mean, I love any type of like grassland nesting bird, or shorebirds, or really any, like, it kind of goes back to me saying that I think shore or songbirds might be cooler than ducks, which I don't feel the same way anymore. But I love seeing all the birds out there, and there's certainly lots of birds that rely on wetlands and grasslands up there. Um, in another life, I wanted to be a canid researcher. So, I know that, nest predators are, not good for ducks, but,
Hmm.
I love seeing foxes and coyotes up there too. I might get some some gruff from Delta about that, but yeah, it's a
Hey,
cool place, lots to
it's
see up there.
it's there's a lot of opinions on this stuff throughout, our community, but like I'm in central New York and we're overrun with deer and everybody's like got a hate on for coyotes, right?
Hmm.
And I'm like, man, they've really never. We grew some warm season grasses, some like big prairie stuff because we didn't want to mow 3 acres of lawn, right?
Yeah.
And there's fox and coyotes out there mousing, and they're in our hedgerows chasing rabbits, and every once in a while they chase a chicken and they get into our chickens. But the reality is I'd hate to not have those things on the landscape. I sit in the deer stand and I watch, the red fox do like creep through the snow and turn
Hmm.
its head sideways, do the listen thing, and then pounce and pull out a
Yeah,
mouse
awesome.
and walk through all our fields and do that and then move on. And we had a litter of fox kits at the end of the driveway one year, and they were playing in our drain pipe, like our sluice pipe that goes under the driveway,
Hmm.
and like one would go through and then the other one would like chase it and like pounce on it when it came out the other end, like up on top. So there's one on
Yeah, it's
in the
so
pipe
cool.
and the one is like attacking it. And then
Yeah.
but the one that was getting attacked in the pipe learned that if it came out the other end it was going to get its ear bit. So it turned around halfway and came out of the pipe. I'm watching this from the bedroom down way down the driveway. And it comes out the back end of the pipe and it sneaks up behind the other one and it bites it in the ass. And I'm like, my God, this is like the coolest thing that's happened to me all year. So
Yeah.
I get the predator issue, but I
Yeah.
never want to see them completely gone, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Coyotes in the night, gives me the creeps, wakes my dogs up. Sometimes they get too close to the house. We do deal with these problems when we need to. I'll just leave it at that.
yeah.
But I don't have the hate on them like some people do in general. They're all pieces of the puzzle. And again, coyotes, I'm like, if they're eating a few fawns in our neighborhood, we have so many deer anyway.
Yeah.
But other
And
places, yes, they are an issue, right?
yeah.
And in places on the prairies where you don't have enough habitat and there's little rims and nest predators can hit stuff and kill as well as hens getting killed and stuff, there are places that are problems for sure.
Oh, sure,
So,
sure. And I mean, I think ultimately though, and I think we do have an overabundance of predators and, not enough nesting habitat. So that really concentrates where these ducks can go. And, if we can find them and we know where they're nesting, well, you can, bet that the predators know where they are too.
Yep.
at the end of the day, though, you can't blame the predator for, being what it is, acting in its nature. Ultimately, it's our job. We have created these or facilitated this overabundance of predators, and it's our job to kind of steward the landscape now. And I think that's one, great thing about the duck world and, duck hunters in general is, you care about the resource and it's your job to maintain and steward it. So, you can have an appreciation for, nest predators like coyotes and foxes, but, also know at the same time that, the problem's not going to fix itself. And I think that's something that duck people do really well is, do applied management to, create a more, I guess you could say like stable ecosystem.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. I mean, our barnyard we've set up with electric fence, geese, if a predator gets inside it, and we've got guinea fowl is our alarm system, because mostly we're worried about meat chickens and egg layers that are really our geese lay eggs too. But not for the whole year like our chickens do for the most part. And so it's kind of like the same thing. You do everything you can on that landscape to defend it from predators, but at some point when it doesn't work, you got to do what you got to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you can respect that animal. Every single time we take out a predator on the farm, I'm not happy about it, right? It doesn't bring me joy or excitement. It's a thing that we have to do to kind of maintain that system.
It's our responsibility.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I'm using an analogy of the farmyard for the prairies, but it is obviously quite very different, but it is our responsibility to keep the balance out there for sure. And all the rock piles, all the old farmhouses, and
the barnyard was a good analogy. We call those raccoon hotels out on the prairie.
Right. For sure. Yeah. So, Grant, let's finish up there. I really appreciate you as a up and coming, young waterfowl professional, and appreciate you spending time with us, and having folks get to see the face of another person, working hard for the ducks out there on the prairies. And so thank you very much for being with us, and thanks for everything you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and I think the work that you're doing is great. I mean, as an up and coming, student and technician, I listen to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. I loved hearing about graduate student work, and I think you giving a spotlight to people in the field is really great, and it's going to inspire a lot of people. Before we hop off, I have a question for you real quick.
Oh goodness, let's see how this goes.
No, this is going to be a fun one. It's nothing to worry about. This is something I ask all of my technicians when they come and work for me. Just real simple. What's your favorite duck and why?
This is a fair question, and I am going to give you a fair answer. And in ornithology class, my students say, "What's your favorite bird?" I don't have one.
Okay.
I don't have one.
That's a good answer.
My favorite tree is an eastern hemlock.
Beautiful tree.
I grew up in a dead-end valley surrounded with eastern hemlocks. It was like a dark, kind of hidden little place. And to this day, that atmosphere inspires me. But when I think about birds, when I think about ducks, it's the diversity that I love. And I don't have a favorite bird. When we're out in class and somebody says it's only a robin, like, oh, what's that bird? Oh, it's only a robin, right? Or it's only a starling. Starling's a damned invasive species, right?
Yeah, beautiful bird though.
They're a beautiful bird, and they have this crazy molt pattern of they don't actually molt their feathers. Like, they're dull, and they actually wear their feathers off to that shine they get in the spring. So their breeding plumage actually comes in from wearing the feathers off during that period. That iridescence underneath is always there. And there's a lot to be learned from American robins. Think about how many kids are inspired by them. So there's no single bird that's like, oh, it's only this. Yeah, they're all part of it. And so I've never, and I think I always stump students, and I'm like, no, just look at all of it. Like, the thing that makes birds so fucking cool is the diversity and their success on this planet through time. And I think ducks are an example of that for sure. Have done really well through time, are one of our older groups of birds in evolutionary time, and continue to succeed somewhat because we lift them up as waterfowl hunters, but because they are just universally adaptive, like how they find food and and make it through these periods of landscape change. And so, yeah, I'll stop talking. I'm just going to leave it at that. All birds are effing cool. So
I wholeheartedly agree with that. That's a great place to end it.
all right. Thank you so much, Grant, and good luck with all your studies, and keep in touch, sir.
Awesome. Thanks.